If you are watching this, do not skip. Not because I need your attention, but because something has been circling your life for a long time, and it brought you here on purpose. You have been living inside a pattern that looks like almost stable, almost free, almost ahead, almost out of pressure. And every time you think it is finally about to break, it resets. A bill appears, a delay hits, a sudden expense shows up like it has perfect timing. A conversation shifts the mood, a door opens then closes. Then you are right back where you started, asking the same question in a different month, with a different face, wearing the same fear. If you are seeing this right now, it is because God is not just trying to give you more money. God is rewriting your money timeline. And the reason it feels intense is because a timeline rewrite does not begin with your bank account. It begins with your identity. Before we go deeper, I want you to do something simple, and I want you to do it now, not later. Go to the comments and type one word, coherence. Do not add a sentence, do not explain, just that one word. Because the moment you declare coherence, you stop feeding the loop with confusion, and that is the first crack in the old pattern. Now, listen carefully. Most people think their financial life is controlled by income, opportunities, or luck. And yes, those things matter. But they are not the root. The root is what you repeatedly expect, what you repeatedly fear, and what you repeatedly observe as true about yourself. Because the invisible enemy is not lack. The invisible enemy is the scarcity observer loop. It works like this. You look at your life through the lens of, I am behind, and that lens becomes your reality filter. You scan for proof that you are behind. You interpret neutral events as negative signs. You treat uncertainty like danger. You move from pressure, not from peace. And the more you observe your reality with panic, the more your nervous system locks into the identity of someone who is always catching up. Then you pray. But the prayer is fighting the identity. Your words ask for overflow, while your attention keeps confirming shortage. Your mouth says faith, but your inner observation says fear. That split creates a loop. This is why some people work harder and still feel stuck. This is why you can make progress and still feel like it is never enough. This is why you can receive money and still feel unsafe, like it could disappear at any moment. It is not your effort, it is the quality of your attention. Attention is agreement. Whatever you consistently give attention to becomes the reality you reinforce. Not because you are manifesting like a magician, but because you are training your mind, your emotions, and your choices to match the version of you that expects a certain outcome. And here is the part that most people miss. The loop is not always obvious. It can look spiritual. It can look responsible. It can look like wisdom. You call it being realistic, but it is actually rehearsing defeat. You call it being cautious, but it is actually worshiping control. You call it waiting on God, but it is actually waiting for proof before you trust. God does not shame you for this. God does not humiliate you for having fear. God aligns you, and alignment starts by exposing the pattern, not by condemning you for having it. So let me ask you a question that may sting, but it will set you free. When you think about money, do you observe your life from peace or from survival? Be honest, because your answer explains why your timeline has been repeating. If your default state is survival, you will keep collapsing the same week, the same month, the same year, just with new details, different scenery, same story, and you will keep calling it bad luck when it is actually an identity script running in the background. But if you are watching this, that script is being interrupted. That is why you feel the pull to keep listening. That is why you felt that tiny spark of recognition when I named the loop. That recognition is not random. It is a signal. You are ready to step out of the old observer role. In the next part, I'm going to show you the paradox that keeps people trapped. The harder you try from fear, the more you freeze the very breakthrough you are begging for. And once you understand why, you will stop chasing money like it is a god, and you will start building a life that can hold what God is already trying to release. There is a paradox that controls most financial destinies, and it is the reason your hardest seasons can produce the smallest results. It is not because you are lazy. It is not because you are cursed. It is because when you try from fear, you do not create movement. You create resistance. The more you try from panic, the more you freeze your reality into the shape of the thing you are trying to escape. Think about what happens when you are under pressure. Your mind starts scanning. Your body tightens, your breath shortens, your thoughts become loud and repetitive. You start checking, you start calculating, you start rehearsing worst-case scenarios and calling it planning. But what is really happening is this: your nervous system becomes the observer, and the observer becomes the author. If the observer is fear, the author writes fear. You can call it stress, you can call it responsibility, you can call it adulthood, but at the root, it is a survival identity trying to control an uncertain world. And control feels powerful in the moment, but it has a hidden cost. It steals your capacity to receive. Because receiving requires openness, control requires tension. And you cannot live in tension and expect overflow to feel safe. This is why some people get an opportunity and sabotage it. Not intentionally, not consciously, but because their identity is not coherent with expansion. Their system does not recognize overflow as normal, so it treats it as unstable, temporary, or dangerous. So they rush, they spend emotionally, they make decisions to soothe fear, they overcommit, they underprice, they accept what they should refuse, they chase what they should build, they run their finances like a person who expects collapse. And then collapse happens, not because money is evil, not because God withdrew favor, but because their inner state was never aligned with stability. Their attention was always braced for impact, and life mirrors that brace. Now, let me say something clearly, because I do not want you to misunderstand me. This is not about blaming yourself. This is about waking up. There is a difference. Blame says, I am bad. Awareness says, I am running a pattern, and patterns can be changed. God does not call you to shame. God calls you to truth, and truth is the doorway to transformation. Here is what the old pattern looks like. You wake up and your first thought is pressure. You reach for your phone and you check. You measure your worth by a number. You measure your safety by a number. You measure your future by a number. And if the number is not what you want, your identity drops. Your confidence drops. Your faith drops. Your vision narrows. That narrowing is the loop, because your attention just collapsed your day into scarcity before the day even began. Then you wonder why your prayers feel heavy. You wonder why your actions feel forced. You wonder why opportunities feel far away. But your mind is not searching for opportunities. It is searching for proof that you should be afraid, and you will always find what you are searching for. That is why the Bible speaks so much about renewing the mind. Not because God is obsessed with rules, but because God is building a vessel. A renewed mind is a mind that can hold what it is asking for. A fearful mind leaks blessings. A divided mind delays breakthroughs. Coherence is the upgrade. Coherence is when your words, your attention, your choices, and your self-image all agree with the same truth. Not perfection, agreement. Most people do not need a new job first. They need a new agreement first. Because you do not move into a new timeline by forcing a new outcome. You move into a new timeline by becoming a new observer. And the reason this matters is because your financial timeline is not just a sequence of events. It is a sequence of versions of you. When you look back on your life, you can almost see the versions. The version who tolerated too much, the version who feared rejection, the version who overworked to feel worthy, the version who avoided learning money because it felt overwhelming, the version who gave everything away to prove they were good, the version who stayed small to stay safe. Those versions were not evil. They were coping. They were surviving. They were trying to protect you with the tools they had at the time. But now, those tools have become chains, and God is rewriting your timeline by asking you to release the version of you that needs fear in order to function. This is where many people resist, because fear feels like responsibility. Fear feels like maturity. Fear feels like control. Letting go can feel like being careless. But letting go is not carelessness. Letting go is trust, and trust is not a feeling. Trust is a decision you practice until your system believes it. So right now, I want you to notice something. Notice what your mind is doing as you listen. Is it arguing? Is it searching for exceptions? Is it saying, yes, but my situation is different? That voice is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is the loop trying to protect itself. The loop does not want you to change because change means it loses control. But you are not here to stay trapped. You are here because a different version of you is waking up. a version that is tired of repeating the same chapter with different dates. And now we have to move into something personal, because this is where the shift becomes real. The moment you realize you have been observing your life for lack, even while you claimed you wanted abundance. Many people say they want more money, but they do not want the internal discomfort of becoming someone who can hold it. They want the blessing, but not the identity upgrade. They want the fruit, but not the root. But the timeline God is rewriting is root first. So I am going to bring you into a short story, not as entertainment, but as a mirror, because you will recognize yourself in it, and recognition is the first step to release. I used to think I was doing everything right. I worked, I stayed responsible, I avoided waste, I tried to be disciplined, and I was in many ways. But under the surface, there was a silent obsession. I needed proof that I was safe, so I observed my life constantly. I checked accounts like checking oxygen. I checked messages like checking approval. I checked outcomes like checking identity. I did not realize that every check was a confession. Every check was me saying, I do not trust that God is carrying me, I trust what I can measure. That is when it hit me. I was not observing to learn. I was observing to reassure fear. And fear is never reassured. It always wants more proof. That is why the loop is exhausting. It demands constant attention. It makes you think about money even when you are not spending. It makes you feel behind even when you are progressing. It makes you feel unsafe even when you are provided for. So the shift began when I stopped asking, how do I get more money? And started asking, what am I agreeing with when I observe my life this way? Because agreement is creation. And the moment you change your agreement, you begin to change what you allow, what you tolerate, what you notice, and what you choose. This is not about pretending. This is not about denial. This is about alignment. Reality responds to alignment faster than most people realize, not because the universe is a vending machine, but because God built you with authority. Your attention directs your authority. Your identity shapes your decisions shape your results. And when those pieces become coherent, doors open in ways that feel almost unreal. The reason it feels unreal is because your old self could not imagine it. Your old observer could not perceive it. The new observer can. So now, we are going to name the signs that your timeline is actually shifting, even if your bank account has not fully caught up yet. Because the shift always shows up inside you before it shows up around you. When God begins rewriting your money timeline, the first changes rarely look like money. They look like disruption. They look like pressure. They look like a strange kind of inner heat that you cannot explain. And if you do not understand what is happening, you will misread the signs and step back into the old loop right when the door is opening. So let me name the signs clearly, because clarity removes fear. And fear is the language of the old observer. The first sign is time distortion. You look up and the days feel fast, but your mind feels slow. You feel like you have been busy, yet something inside you whispers, I am not building what I am meant to build. Or you feel the opposite. You take one small action and it feels like it rearranges an entire week. Time becomes inconsistent because your focus is being reallocated. You are leaving the timeline where your attention is scattered and entering the timeline where your attention is deliberate. The second sign is repetition with different faces. It might be the same kind of expense, the same kind of conflict, the same kind of opportunity, or the same kind of fear. It keeps showing up, but you are noticing it with sharper eyes. That is not life attacking you. That is God revealing the pattern. Patterns cannot be healed while they are invisible. When you start seeing the repetition clearly, you are no longer inside it unconsciously. You are standing above it. The third sign is what people call glitches. A message arrives at exactly the right moment. A person calls you after you think of them. You hear the same phrase from different places. Something that felt blocked suddenly moves. Something that felt stable suddenly shifts. It can feel eerie, but it is often simply alignment making reality feel more responsive. When your inner state becomes coherent, the external world feels like it is answering faster because your choices are cleaner and your perception is less polluted by fear. The fourth sign is pressure in the body, not just anxiety, not just stress, a pressure that feels like you are being stretched. It can show up in the chest, the throat, the stomach. It can feel like you are on the edge of something, but you cannot name what it is. This is where many people self-sabotage because they mistake stretching for danger. But sometimes, pressure is not a warning. Sometimes, pressure is expansion. If you have been praying for provision and suddenly your tolerance is shrinking, your patience is thinning, and your spirit is restless, that may not be you falling apart. That may be you outgrowing the old agreement. The fifth sign is that people start reacting to you differently. Some people become inspired. Some become uncomfortable. Some become distant. Some suddenly respect you. Some suddenly test you. This is not random. When your identity shifts, your boundaries shift. When your boundaries shift, the world has to renegotiate how it relates to you. That renegotiation can look like conflict at first, but it is often just reality adjusting to the new version of you. Now, let me say something that will protect you. When these signs begin, your old self will try to interpret them through fear. Time distortion will become, I am behind. Repetition will become, this always happens to me. Glitches will become, I do not trust this. Pressure will become, something is wrong with me. Different reactions will become, I should shrink. That is the old observer trying to regain control, but the new observer asks different questions. Instead of, why is this happening to me? You ask, what is this trying to reveal? Instead of, how do I stop this discomfort? You ask, what am I being trained to hold? Instead of, what if I fail? You ask, what if God is upgrading me? Because upgrades do not feel comfortable to the version being replaced. There is a reason the old self panics when the new timeline begins. The old self believes it keeps you safe. The old self believes it is protecting you. So when change begins, the old self sounds an alarm. That alarm is not always truth, it is habit. So if you are watching this and you have been feeling strange lately, you are not crazy, you are not broken, you are not too sensitive. You are waking up to the pattern that has been controlling your financial life. And this is where it gets deeply spiritual, because money is never just money. Money is trust. Money is identity. Money is worth. Money is permission. Money is what you believe you are allowed to have, allowed to hold, allowed to manage, allowed to multiply. Some people do not struggle because they lack intelligence. They struggle because they carry a hidden belief that overflow would make them unsafe, rejected, judged, or responsible for everyone else. So they unconsciously stay in cycles where they can say, I would be generous if I had more, while never facing the fear of actually having more. Others carry the belief that money will corrupt them, so they keep their life just tight enough to feel pure. They confuse suffering with righteousness. They confuse struggle with virtue. But God does not measure you by your scarcity. God measures you by your stewardship. Stewardship is the ability to hold something without worshipping it and to release something without fearing it. That is why God rewrites money timelines through identity. If you cannot hold money without losing peace, money becomes a test you are not ready to pass. Not because God is cruel, but because God is kind. God does not hand a weapon to a child. God does not hand authority to an identity that would collapse under it. So the timeline rewrite begins by creating a new internal environment, an environment where peace is normal, an environment where discipline is not punishment, an environment where planning is wisdom, not panic, an environment where giving is not self-erasure, an environment where receiving is not guilt. This is why the shift often starts with a painful awareness. You begin to see the ways you have been negotiating with fear. You begin to see the ways you have been performing faith while secretly demanding proof. You begin to see the ways you have been expecting God to bless you while you keep agreeing with lack. This awareness can feel heavy for a moment, but it is actually mercy. Because once you see the agreement, you can change it. And this brings us to the key that collapses the new timeline into place. The key is not a method. The key is not a trick. The key is a gate that has been in your mouth your whole life. two words that are spoken casually by most people, but used as a weapon against themselves. I am. Every identity begins with those words, and whatever you attach to them becomes the lens you observe reality through. If you say, I am always struggling, your mind will search for struggle. If you say, I am not good with money, your choices will confirm it. If you say, I am behind, you will rush and you will leak. If you say, I am never lucky, you will ignore doors when they open. But if you speak I am as alignment, you stop cursing your own timeline, because I am is not just a statement, it is a direction. This is why God named himself with I am, not as poetry, but as revelation. Identity is creative authority, and you were made in the image of a creator. Your words are not decoration, your words are agreement. So now we are going to move into how to use I am without pretending, without forcing emotion, and without turning faith into performance. We are going to build coherence in a way your nervous system can actually accept, so your life stops snapping back to the old pattern. The reason I am is so powerful is because it does not start with your circumstances. It starts with your authority, and authority is not the same as denial. A lot of people hear identity language and think it means pretending. They think it means ignoring reality, speaking in a way that feels fake, and forcing themselves to believe something they do not believe. That is not coherence. That is pressure, and pressure is what the old loop is made of. Coherence is different. Coherence is when your inner world stops arguing with itself. You can tell when you are not coherent, because even when you say the right words, your body does not agree. Your chest tightens, your jaw clenches, your mind whispers, that is not true. And then you feel worse, because now you feel like you failed at faith. But faith is not a performance you win. Faith is a direction you choose. So how do you use I am without pretending? You build a bridge your nervous system can cross. Most people try to jump from I am struggling to I am wealthy in one sentence. Their system rejects it because the gap is too wide. It feels unsafe. It feels like lying. And when the system feels unsafe, it snaps back into the old identity even harder. Instead of making a jump, you build a ladder. You choose statements that are true enough to hold, but strong enough to lead. For example, if your current reality is tight, you do not have to say, I am overflowing, like you are trying to hypnotize yourself. You can say, I am learning to steward what I have. I am becoming disciplined. I am guided, even when I cannot see the full path. I am provided for in ways I used to overlook. I am building a life that can hold increase. These are not fantasies. These are alignments. And the moment your inner world can agree with the statement, you become coherent. When you become coherent, you stop leaking energy into inner conflict. When you stop leaking energy, your choices get cleaner. When your choices get cleaner, your results stop being random. This is why the timeline starts changing before the money shows up, because the money is often waiting on the version of you who can hold it without panic. Now here is a hard truth that becomes liberating when you accept it. Your bank account is not just a number, it is a mirror of agreements. Agreements about what you deserve, agreements about what is safe, agreements about how life works, agreements about whether God is trustworthy, agreements about whether you have to suffer to be worthy. And the most dangerous agreements are the ones you do not know you are making. One of the biggest hidden agreements is this: I need proof before I trust. That agreement sounds reasonable, it sounds mature, it sounds logical, but spiritually, it is backwards, because trust is not the reward after proof. Trust is the doorway before provision. This is where your relationship with God becomes real, not religious, because you are not being asked to deny facts. You are being asked to stop worshiping them. Facts are information. They are not identity. You might be in debt, that is a fact, but I am a debtor forever is identity. You might be behind on a bill, that is a fact, but I am always behind is identity. You might have made mistakes, that is a fact, but I am irresponsible is identity. God rewrites timelines by separating facts from identity. Because when you attach a covenant word like I am to a temporary fact, you turn a season into a sentence. You turn a moment into a prophecy. You turn pressure into a personality. So from this point forward, you do not speak I am from panic. You speak I am from alignment. And alignment looks like this. You acknowledge what is real. without letting it define you. You choose what is true, even if you are still walking toward it. You act in the direction of the truth you declared. That last part matters, because coherence is not only words. Coherence is words plus movement. If you say, "I am disciplined," then you build one disciplined action into your day. If you say, "I am a wise steward," then you stop spending to soothe emotions. If you say, "I am guided," then you stop rushing and start listening. Small actions are not small in the spirit. Small actions are evidence. Evidence trains the nervous system. The nervous system learns safety. Safety creates stability. Stability creates capacity. Capacity welcomes increase. And this is why the enemy of your financial future is not just lack. It is emotional spending, anxious checking, and rushed decisions made to silence fear for a moment. Fear always wants relief now, even if it costs you later. But the new you is not chasing relief. The new you is building legacy. So I want you to anchor a statement right now, one that is strong, simple, and coherent. And I want you to write it in the comments under the word you already typed as a second line. I am guided into financial peace. Say it out loud too. Slowly, not like a wish, like a decision. Because when God rewrites your money timeline, He does not just hand you more. He rebuilds the part of you that can be trusted with more. And you can feel that rebuilding happening as you start to notice what triggers you, what tempts you, what drains you, and what strengthens you. Now that you can feel the difference between facts and identity, you need a way to interrupt the loop in real time. Because the loop does not break once. It tries to come back through habits, old reactions, and moments when you feel tired or under pressure. And if you do not have a protocol, you will accidentally hand your attention back to fear. So here is what you do when the scarcity observer loop starts speaking. First, name what is happening without drama. Not, "My life is falling apart." Not, "God left me." Not, "I am ruined." You say, "My system is trying to observe from survival." That sentence separates you from the pattern. You are not the fear. You are the one noticing the fear, and the one who notices is already above the loop. Second, stop the automatic behavior. Most people try to change thoughts while still feeding the loop with actions. They keep checking, refreshing, calculating, comparing, and then they wonder why peace will not come. So you practice a holy interruption. Pause the check, pause the scroll, pause the mental replay. Then take one slow breath that is deeper than your panic wants to allow. Your body is the doorway. If your body stays in alarm, your mind will keep hunting for danger. But if your body softens, your mind can receive new instruction. Third, choose the new observation. This is where I am becomes a steering wheel. You do not say I am rich if your system rejects it. You say the coherent truth that leads you forward, such as, I am safe enough to make wise decisions. I am learning to build stability without worshipping control. I am provided for as I steward what is in my hands. I am becoming the kind of person who multiplies what God entrusts. These statements do not beg, they do not panic, they align. Then you prove it with one small action that matches the statement. This is where timelines rewrite, because you rewrite you. If you declared stewardship, you track one expense instead of avoiding the truth. If you declared discipline, you cancel one impulse purchase instead of soothing fear. If you declared guidance, you ask, what is the next right step? And you do only that. Small, coherent actions train capacity. Here is a reset you can use in the middle of a chaotic day. Take 3 slow breaths. On the first, release the need to control. On the second, release the need to predict. On the third, release the need to punish yourself. Then ask, what would a wise steward do in the next hour? Not the next year, the next hour. If you want accountability, write this in the comments. I am guided into financial peace. You are not doing it for me. You are doing it to make your new agreement visible. Because money is not only provision, Money is responsibility and weight. If you have been carrying fear, God will not add weight until your foundation is stable. That is mercy. Now, there is a reason the loop feels personal. The loop usually formed in a moment when you learned a lesson that was never meant to become your law. Maybe you watched someone you loved struggle, and you learned that life is unsafe. Maybe you experienced loss and you learned that things disappear. Maybe you were judged for wanting more and you learned that desire is dangerous. Those are not truths. Those are scars trying to protect you. God heals you by rewriting the meaning you assigned to the past. So when the old story says, "See, you are not safe," the new story says, "I am guided through uncertainty." When the old story says, "See, it always collapses," the new story says, "I am building with patience and wisdom." This is covenant thinking, an agreement that does not change every time feelings change, and your financial life stabilizes when your inner agreement stabilizes. If you want a simple test of your current agreement, listen to your first sentence when something unexpected happens. Do you speak fear first, or do you speak direction first? That first sentence is the observer choosing a timeline, and you are learning to choose differently. There is a moment in every timeline rewrite where God asks you to release something you have been calling wisdom, but it is really just old fear with a respectable name. This is the part where the old you tries to negotiate. It says, "I will trust, but only if I see a guarantee." It says, "I will be faithful, but only if nothing goes wrong." It says, "I will obey, but only if it feels safe." And that is how the loop survives, by turning trust into a contract. But God is not rewriting your money timeline by making you better at contracts. God is rewriting it by making you coherent with covenant. Covenant does not depend on perfect conditions. Covenant holds steady while conditions change. This is why letting go is not optional. The old self cannot carry the new assignment, not because you are weak, but because that version of you was trained for survival, not stewardship. Survival says, hold tight. Stewardship says, hold wisely. Survival says, clutch. Stewardship says, build. So what does letting go actually look like in real life? It looks like releasing the identity that needs chaos to feel normal. It looks like releasing the habit of checking for danger before you check for direction. It looks like releasing the vow you made in pain, like, I will never depend on anyone, or I have to do it all alone, or if I have more, people will take from me. Some of you made vows without realizing it, not out loud, not formally, but internally. A moment happened, and your heart decided a rule, and you have been living under that rule ever since. Maybe you watched someone you loved lose everything, and you decided money is unstable. Maybe you were betrayed, and you decided trust is dangerous. Maybe you were shamed for wanting more, and you decided desire makes me selfish. Those rules feel protective, but they quietly sabotage increase because they are agreements with limitation. So here is an exercise that breaks agreements without forcing emotion. Say this slowly, out loud, like you mean it. I release every vow I made in fear. I release the identity that expects struggle. I release the need to be punished before I can be blessed. I release the belief that I must control everything to be safe. I choose coherence with God's provision. Then pause for a breath. Let your body notice the difference between releasing and gripping. Because your body knows when you are lying. Your body knows when you are performing. But your body also knows when you are choosing truth. And here is what is going to happen after you do this. The old loop will test you. A small inconvenience will show up, and the old observer will whisper, "See, nothing changed." A delay will happen, and the old observer will whisper, "See, God is not moving." A temptation will appear, and the old observer will whisper, "Just soothe yourself. You deserve it." Tobii, this is not failure. This is the threshold. A threshold is the moment your identity gets challenged to prove what it believes. So if you want to lock in this shift, you respond differently when the test comes. Not perfectly, differently. You stop making the moment mean that your whole life is doomed. You stop collapsing your entire future into one feeling. You stop handing authority to the loudest thought in your mind. Instead, you say, "This is a test of my observation, not a prophecy of my future." And then you choose one coherent action anyway. If this message is hitting you, do not let it stay private. Go to the comments and write, "I release the old timeline." Keep it simple. Let it be a marker. And I am going to put one invitation here only once for the people who know this is not entertainment for them. If you want more transmissions like this, more guidance that merges faith, identity, and real financial alignment, subscribe to Quantum Reflection. Not for hype, but for consistency. Consistency is where timelines change. Now stay with me, because the next layer is where God's rewrite becomes visible in your daily choices. What you tolerate, what you delay, what you keep calling later, and the quiet habits that either multiply your peace or leak it. When God rewrites your money timeline, He starts touching the things you keep tolerating. Not because He is trying to make your life harder, but because tolerance is agreement in disguise. What you tolerate teaches your nervous system what is normal, and whatever becomes normal becomes your future. This is why the rewrite often feels like a holy discomfort. You start feeling irritated by habits you used to excuse. You start feeling tired of conversations you used to endure. You start feeling a quiet conviction when you spend emotionally, procrastinate decisions, or say yes when you should say no. That is not condemnation. That is recalibration. The old timeline was built on leakage. Leakage of attention, leakage of energy, leakage of time, leakage of self-respect. And money follows those streams. Where your life leaks, your finances leak. Where your life becomes coherent, your finances become coherent. So here is a simple audit. Not to overwhelm you, but to give you clarity. Because clarity breaks loops. Ask yourself this: where am I leaking the most? First, emotional spending. Not spending for needs, spending for relief, spending to feel in control, spending to numb, spending to reward yourself for suffering, spending because you are bored or lonely or anxious or trying to prove you are doing fine. The old identity says, just buy it, you deserve it. But what it really means is, I do not know how to soothe myself without paying for it. A rewritten timeline teaches you a new language of comfort. You learn how to breathe, pray, move your body, drink water, and slow down before you purchase. You learn how to sit with discomfort without turning it into a transaction. Second, anxious checking, constantly watching accounts, waiting for a number to decide your mood, refreshing like it is a ritual, treating updates like oxygen. That is not management, that is attachment. Management is calm, attachment is urgent. A wise steward checks with intention, not compulsion. A wise steward does not let a number crown itself as the ruler of the day. Third, delayed decisions. This one is subtle, but it is powerful. When you delay the hard decision, you pay interest in stress. When you delay a boundary, you pay in energy. When you delay learning, you pay in confusion. When you delay structure, you pay in chaos. The old timeline is built on later. Later I will budget. Later I will learn investing. Later I will raise my prices. Later I will stop helping everyone at my expense. Later I will take this seriously. But later is the language of a self that does not believe it is worth stability. So if God is rewriting your timeline, you will feel a push toward clean decisions, not dramatic decisions, clean ones. A clean decision is a decision without excuses. Clean decisions create clean energy. Clean energy creates clear direction. Clear direction produces consistent results. Now let me give you a practice that locks this in. The next time you feel pressure about money, do not ask, "How do I fix everything?" That question triggers panic. Ask this instead: what is the most coherent action I can take right now? Maybe it is writing down every expense from the last few days. Maybe it is unsubscribing from the thing that tempts you. Maybe it is setting one automatic transfer, even if it is small. Maybe it is sending one email you have been avoiding. Maybe it is telling someone respectfully, "I cannot do that anymore." Do not underestimate small coherence. Small coherence is how God builds trust with you. And as trust grows, capacity grows. As capacity grows, increase becomes safe. If this is landing for you, I want you to mark it publicly so your old self cannot pretend it did not happen. Write this in the comments: I choose stewardship over survival, not as a slogan, as a turning point, because the new timeline is not a fantasy. It is a sequence of choices that match a new identity. And when your identity changes, You stop negotiating with fear. You stop selling your peace for short-term relief. You stop calling chaos normal. You stop calling burnout ambition. You stop calling anxiety wisdom. You become steady, and steady people build. Steadiness is not boring. Steadiness is power under control. And for many people, steadiness is the most unfamiliar state because chaos has been their baseline for so long that peace feels suspicious. That is why the rewritten timeline can feel quiet at first. It does not always arrive with fireworks. It often arrives like a new internal atmosphere. You start waking up with less dread. You start making decisions with less urgency. You start hearing your own thoughts more clearly because fear is no longer shouting over everything. And this is where the deepest shift happens. You stop trying to force outcomes and you start building alignment. For years, you may have treated money like a scoreboard, like proof, like a verdict. If it was high, you felt worthy. If it was low, you felt behind. But God is removing money from the throne because anything on the throne becomes an idol, even if it looks practical. When money is on the throne, you worship results. When God is on the throne, you worship obedience. Obedience does not mean passive waiting. Obedience means doing the next right thing consistently, even when fear demands a shortcut. Shortcuts are how the old timeline stays alive. The old self loves shortcuts because shortcuts give relief without transformation. But relief without transformation is just a temporary break before the next loop. So this is what it looks like when God rewrites your money timeline at the level of character. You become honest without self-hatred. You become disciplined without becoming harsh. You become ambitious without becoming anxious. You become generous without erasing yourself. You become patient without becoming passive. These are spiritual traits, but they are also financial traits. A person who cannot be patient will overtrade. A person who cannot be honest will avoid numbers. A person who cannot be disciplined will leak. A person who cannot hold boundaries will be drained. A person who cannot be calm will make expensive decisions. So the rewrite is not only about getting money, it is about becoming someone who can carry it without losing your soul. Now, let me give you something very practical that also works spiritually: a daily alignment check. Once per day, ask yourself 3 questions. What did I observe today? What did I speak today? What did I choose today? Because these 3 things form your timeline. What you observe becomes your focus. What you speak becomes your agreement. What you choose becomes your evidence. If your observation was fear, your agreement becomes fear, and your evidence becomes fear. That is the loop. But if you observe with faith, speak with coherence, and choose with wisdom, you generate evidence for the new identity. And evidence is what trains your nervous system to stop panicking. This is why your shift might not feel magical. It feels like stability. It feels like momentum. It feels like your life finally stops slipping through your fingers. And here is another sign that you are in the rewrite. Your temptations get more specific, not necessarily worse, just more targeted. If your weakness was emotional spending, you will feel the urge to buy when you feel lonely. If your weakness was approval, you will feel the urge to impress people with purchases. If your weakness was impatience, you will feel the urge to take a risky deal that promises fast money. If your weakness was people-pleasing, you will feel the urge to give away what you cannot afford to give. These are not random. These are identity tests. And every time you choose coherence over impulse, you strengthen the new timeline. So if you feel that tension lately, do not call it failure. Call it training. Training is holy. A muscle does not grow in comfort. A muscle grows under resistance. Your character grows the same way. And character is what holds money without collapsing. Now there is one more layer that completes this message, because a rewritten money timeline is not only about what you stop doing, it is about what you begin to expect from God in a clean way, without bargaining, without fear, and without shame. Some of you have been afraid to expect good things because you think disappointment will destroy you. So you keep your expectations low to protect your heart. But low expectation is still an agreement. It is an agreement with limitation. God is inviting you into an expectation that is humble, not entitled, confident, not demanding, peaceful, not desperate. That kind of expectation is rare, and when you carry it, your life changes because you stop living like you are about to lose everything. You start living like you are being led, and being led changes how you move. You stop rushing, you stop forcing, you stop comparing, you stop begging, you build, you steward, you become coherent. And when you become coherent, you begin to notice something subtle. Doors that used to feel invisible start showing up in ordinary places. A conversation becomes an opportunity. A skill you ignored becomes valuable. A habit you overlooked becomes the difference. A connection becomes a bridge. It does not feel like magic. It feels like guidance. That is how God rewrites timelines. He changes the person who walks through the day, and the day responds to the new person. Guidance is not always loud. Most of the time it is quiet, steady, and simple. It is a gentle push away from what drains you and a gentle pull toward what builds you. And when you start trusting that guidance, your life stops feeling like a constant emergency. This is where the rewrite becomes undeniable, because you begin to recognize a pattern that used to be invisible. God has been trying to lead you out of the loop for a long time, but the old observer kept interrupting the signal with fear. Fear is noisy. Guidance is calm. Fear says, decide right now or you will lose everything. Guidance says, do the next right thing and keep moving. Fear says, check again, maybe you missed something. Guidance says, you already know what to do. Fear says, if you relax, it will fall apart. Guidance says, if you trust, you will build. So here is the finishing piece of this message, the part that seals the timeline shift. You stop asking God to change your money before He changes you. You let God change you, and your money begins to follow the new structure. This does not mean you stop taking action. It means your action becomes clean. Clean action is action without panic. Clean action is action without self-hatred. Clean action is action without bargaining. And when your action becomes clean, you begin to feel something many people have not felt in years. Momentum that does not cost your peace. That is the sign of a rewritten timeline. Now I want to speak to the person who has been carrying shame about money. Not guilt for mistakes, but shame. The feeling that you are defective, that you should have figured it out by now, that you are behind compared to other people. Shame is a spiritual trap because it makes you hide from the very truth that can heal you. Shame makes you avoid numbers. Shame makes you avoid learning. Shame makes you avoid asking questions. Shame makes you avoid taking steps because you feel like steps will expose you. But God does not use shame to guide you. God uses light. So if you have been hiding, you come into the light now. You do not come into the light to be punished. You come into the light to be rebuilt. And rebuilding is exactly what is happening. This is why you felt this message hit you. This is why you stayed. This is why you recognized yourself in the loop, because the old chapter is closing. Now here is a simple declaration to seal it. Say it out loud, slowly. I am no longer in agreement with scarcity. I am becoming a wise steward. I am guided into stability. I am allowed to build. I am allowed to receive. I am allowed to multiply without losing myself. Let the words land. Do not rush past them. This is not a mantra. This is a realignment. And now, I want you to take one action today that proves you believe what you said. One action, not 10, not a perfect plan. One coherent move. It could be writing down your expenses from the last few days. It could be setting a small automatic transfer. It could be canceling one subscription that does not serve your future. It could be learning one concept that you have avoided. It could be having one honest conversation you have been delaying. Because the new timeline is built the same way everything strong is built, one brick at a time, placed with intention. And remember this, your old self will try to return when you are tired. The loop will whisper, nothing changed, but you do not argue with the loop. You do not debate it. You do not negotiate with it. You observe it, you bless yourself, and you choose coherence anyway. That is maturity, that is faith, that is power. If you made it to this point, I want you to leave a final mark in the comments. Write, my timeline is rewritten, not as a superstition, as a decision, as a public agreement, because when you speak it, you stop giving your attention to the old story, and you start reinforcing the new one. You are not watching a random video, you are standing at a threshold. And the threshold does not ask if you feel ready. It asks if you are willing to stop observing from fear, willing to stop checking for proof before trusting, willing to stop calling survival normal, willing to let God lead you into stability. This is how your money timeline changes, not overnight as a fantasy, but immediately as an agreement, immediately as a new observer, immediately as a new you.